The following are based on true events, according to their authors. This is actually my friend's story, but I was almost a daily guest at her house, so I think I might be able to tell it like she would. She lived at her parents' house. We were around 17 or 18 years old, and they had just moved into a big house from a small apartment. They had a dog who was extremely well behaved, but sometimes in the middle of the night, he would start growling and barking. One early morning, my friend's dad followed the dog to the kitchen where he saw a young man trying to get in through the window. The man got away before the police got there, but the growling and barking just didn't stop. And sometimes we could all hear weird sounds like someone was walking on the roof of the house or something. Her dad would often have a look up into the attic and saw nothing, so he blamed these sounds on the weather, changes in the heat or cold and humidity making the woods crackle. This went on for a few years. A few nights a week the dog would growl and they would hear what sounded like footsteps. I spent some nights there, and one time my friend woke me up just to make me listen. Years later, a few years after my friend moved out from her parents' place, her dad was doing something in the attic when he found a tiny little door in the far corner. He had never noticed it before because this corner of the attic was really dark. He opened the tiny little door, and what he saw in the beam of his flashlight really freaked everyone out. He saw a dirty mattress, some burnt out candles, and candy wrappers. It has been years since she told me about what her father saw, but I still get goosebumps thinking about it. Someone had actually been living in their attic. Maybe the guy who tried to climb in through the window? I don't know, but this was probably the creepiest thing I have ever heard. The mother of one of my best friend and my roommate in sophomore and junior year of college told us this story when I was visiting her over spring break. To this day, it gives me chills every time I think about it. When she was a teenager, she lived in a more rural or small town part of Minnesota, and she and her friends did a lot of bus taking, walking and hitchhiking to different locations. Hitchhiking was generally really safe because everyone in the town knew everyone else, and not many people passed through. One early evening during the summer, she and her friend were on their way back home, and they were walking along the highway looking for someone to hitchhike with because it was hot and they didn't want to walk the rest of the way. So this older man, who's probably around 50, stops to pick them up, and it's one of those older cars where the first row of seats is a bench and can sit 3 people. Both my friend's mom and her friend slide into the seat. Her mom first, so that she's sitting next to the guy, and then her mom's friend sat on her other side. The guy is really nice, asks where they want to go and says he's going their way and he'll take them home. So they are chatting with this guy and he's joking around with them and telling stories, etc. While they are driving, the guy pulls off the highway onto an access road, and my friend's mom realizes they're taking a different route than what she used to get home. She starts getting a little uneasy but doesn't say anything to her friend, who is still chatting away. However, instead of continuing along this access road, he pulls off onto a gravel road, and my friend's mom starts getting really freaked out when she realizes they're approaching an abandoned rock quarry, still driving relatively fast. In one movement, my friend's mom opens the door and pushes her friend out of the car and tells her to run. The guy grabs her, but she hits him in the face and is able to roll out. By this time, it was dark, so the girls ran and hid in the quarry. She said the scariest part about hiding and waiting was that the guy turned his lights off, and she could hear his car slowly crunching over the gravel as he circled and waited for them to try and escape. After a couple of hours, the girls weren't hearing the gravel anymore and decided that he was gone and that they would try and climb over the quarry fence to get back to the highway access road. They crawl over to the fence, and my friend's mom gives her friend a boost to help her over. However, as she starts to climb, she hears a car. The guy found was still waiting, and he turns his headlights back on and guns it at the fence. She manages to get over without being hit by him, and the girls just run for it. They cross the highway access road and get into the woods on the side of the highway. They crawl in a ditch until their exit because they are afraid the guy is on the highway looking for them. They make it home safe and tell the police, but the police never found the guy. Let me just preface this with the fact that this was the one time my parents let me stay home unsupervised for an entire day without a much older babysitter. And so begins my story. It all started one hot, boring afternoon in the suburbs. I was spending the day with some of the neighborhood kids while our parents were at work. Although I was only 10 years old at the time, my parents let me spend the day with the two girls that lived across the street because the oldest of the two sisters was 13. The other, my best friend Sarah at the time, was 9 years old. We were laying out on the trampoline playing the "What do you want to do? I don't know, what do you want to do" game. Then we heard that exciting little jingle in the distance, the ice cream man. We all started scrambling out the door after the older sister, Tammy, who had the money. We rushed down the street to the waiting ice cream man, joining the group of boys who were outside playing. As soon as we walked up and saw the driver, I got an eerie feeling. Something just seemed off about him. At first, I thought I was just being paranoid, considering he had a massively ratchet scar down the side of his face, but he just didn't stop smiling. It was a sinister type smile, coupled with an unrelenting gaze fixed right on us. We quickly bought our ice cream and bubblegum and left. As we were walking back towards our cul-de-sac, Bossy Tammy ordered us to stop and sit on our neighbor's driveway and eat our ice cream. She said, "Look, I've heard stories on the news of these guys stealing kids, so let's just sit here on Miss Day's driveway until he drives away." Up until this point, Tammy had a history of telling us bogus stories just to try and scare us, so Sarah started whining. On any other day, I would have agreed with her, but I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was just a bit off. The ice cream truck then continued towards us, driving incredibly slow around our cul-de-sac. He was still smiling, and his eyes were still trained on the three of us. When he passed us, he even winked. As soon as he disappeared around the corner, we made a mad dash for Tammy and Sarah's house. We locked the doors and then fled to our parents' bedroom. A few minutes go by, and we had all calmed down a bit, and had settled onto her parents' bed to watch some terrible daytime TV like Jerry Springer or something. At that point, out of her parents' window that faces in towards the cul-de-sac on the second floor, we saw the ice cream truck stopped outside of Miss Day's house. We didn't know how long he had been there, considering he didn't have the jingle playing. He wasn't parked there very long and eventually slowly drove away. By this time, we were all hyperventilating, but before we could take a minute to recover, he drove by a third time. This time, however, we saw him get out of the truck in front of Miss Day's house and walked up towards the front door and started to examine outside of the house. He had a pad of paper out and began to jot something down. We all started panicking at this point as Tammy yelled out, "Is he writing down the address?" He returned to the ice cream wagon, and as he started to turn the truck around, he looked up and saw us in the window. We hit the floor like we were under fire and watched him out of a side window. He stopped the truck right in front of Tammy and Sarah's house and jotted more down on his pad of paper. As soon as he drove away that time, we saw our neighbor arrive home from work. In a complete frenzy, we ran over to her, knowing she worked at the police station, and told her what had happened. Ultimately, they found the guy along with a notepad of descriptions of each one of us, the addresses of Miss Day's house and Tammy and Sarah's house, as well as plans for when he was going to come back for us. The guy was a registered child sex offender with a warrant out for his arrest. I'm not sure how he got in that position to be selling ice cream to children in the first place, but he was. So now, every time I hear the ice cream wagon jingle, I feel nauseous and unnerved. At about 2 a.m. last night, I was in the car with my girlfriend, heading back to my place to drop her off to her car. I noticed a car parked on the side of the road by the stop sign of our street. It didn't look like anyone was in it, so I just ignored it. We continued down into the end of our road and pulled into my driveway. I walk her to her car and kiss her goodbye. Minutes later, she calls me panicking. "Someone is following me. He's trying to hit the back of my car. Help!" I swing the door open to my room and hurl down the stairs to my car in the garage. I floor it and find out where she was. Sure enough, it was the car that was parked by the stop sign. The guy was right behind her car, weaving, trying to get beside her and almost hitting her car. I quickly jot down his license plate and speed up behind him. I pulled beside him and act like I'm going to ram him off the road. He pulls his car over slowly, and I slow down to get a good look at him. He was smiling with his eyes at me, in a ski mask. I start calling the cops while I'm following my girlfriend, who is now calming down on the phone. I look in the rear view mirror and see him turn around slowly and go into the opposite direction. The cops show up and I tell them everything, but there's not much they can do at that point. The creepy thing is that he knows where I live. I really hope that he doesn't come back.